You're listening to Docs Outside the Box, episode 52.
Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting-edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry. You're getting real live insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
This episode is brought to you by Set for Life Insurance. Protect yourself against life setbacks with Set for Life Insurance. Set for Life Insurance gets you disability and life insurance at a reduced cost with their exclusive discounts. Now that's why I use them. Visit www.setforlifeinsurance.com and tell them Dr. Darko sent you. What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee Darko, your host, here for another episode of Docs Outside the Box. Really appreciate you all coming back. This is going to be a good one. Before we get to our next guest, I want to just quickly talk about two housekeeping items. One being the Docs Outside the Box Physician Podcast Directory. Very easy to navigate, very easy to discover new podcasts that are out there. These are podcasts that are hosted by physicians. Just go to the website, www.docsotb.com, and then select on DOTB directory, which is a menu item. And you can either submit a podcast if you're a physician podcaster, or you can view podcasts if you're just someone who's looking for additional podcasts. And it's very easy to view. It's very easy to use. And also at the same time, there's an option where if you want to leave a review, if you want to leave a critique of these podcasts, it's very easy to do so. So make sure you use that podcast. Make sure that podcast directory, make sure you let other people know about that. Also, I want to quickly just thank everyone who's left Apple Podcast reviews, as well as other reviews on the website and on Stitcher Radio. I know I used to read this stuff on the show. I will get back to doing that. It's just that I've had so many great guests that sometimes reading all of the reviews and then getting to the show, it made the show so much longer. So I just want to say thank you all for leaving your critiques. I've looked at all of those critiques, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and I've tried to make the show a lot better. So also real quick, don't forget to check out Docs Outside the Box Nation. That is our Facebook group. All you have to do is type into your website, docsotbnation.com. It'll take you directly to the Facebook group, and there you can network with other like-minded people. You can also get recaps as well as live streams from me on previous episodes, future episodes, or just in general where my mind is at in terms of getting new guests and things of that nature. So please check out the Facebook group. I think you all will be very pleased about that. Now, on to our next guest. So before I introduce my next guest, I just really want to stress this one point. Now, I think it's very important that we have people from various backgrounds to tell their stories of living outside the box on this show, Docs Outside the Box, right? Whether it's a voice that's coming from the suburbs, whether it's a voice that's coming from the city, rural areas, the docs that I have on my show, they're going to give you a view. They're going to give you a perspective. They're going to give you solutions that I think it's very easy to tell. Like, we all collectively can learn from these points of view. So there's a lot of thought that goes into the process of figuring out who is going to be a good fit for the show. And I'm going to take pride in that. I'm really proud that my guests have and continue to give relatable and actionable advice to you all. And that continues with my next guest. My next guest, similar to Kevin Poe, also known as Kevin MD, my next guest really understands the interplay between doctors, media, as well as the communities that we all serve. She brings a very unique perspective on how we measure, determine, as well as improve the health of a community. And what makes her very unique is that she's a physician who works for the government, has stopped practicing clinical medicine, but someone who also understands social justice. My next guest is Dr. Aletha Maybank, and she works at one of the largest and oldest public health agencies in the world. That's right. She works as the Deputy Commissioner at the New York Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and is also now the director of the Center of Health Equity. So this is all really powerful, meaningful stuff. And look, I'm not going to mumble this. I'm not going to mess this up by stumbling it. So I'm just going to read you exactly what the mission of the Center of Health Equity is. It is, in quotes, "We will strengthen and amplify the health department's work to eliminate health inequities which are rooted in historical and contemporary injustices and discrimination, including racism," end quotes. Now, that is some serious work. That is a serious cause. I am definitely all for that. So really quickly, Dr. Maybank, she is formally trained as a pediatrician. She also has some additional residency training in preventive medicine, as well as she has her MPH from Columbia University. Now, look, it all didn't start out all sweet and smelling like roses for her. She's going to share with us, how working as a hospitalist, she just didn't enjoy the way how medicine was practiced in that realm on a day in and day out basis. And she's going to talk about how that led her, in essence, on a mission to kind of just trailblaze her own path to career fulfillment, right? Not only is she fulfilled in her career, she's also happy. And this ultimately has led her to be a huge force for change in the health of communities in New York City. So from a media perspective, she's everywhere. I mean, she's been featured in MSNBC. She's been featured on Essence Magazine, Huffington Post, Fox, BET, all over the radio. I mean, she's got so many accolades, I can't even name them. So as always, I always want to tell people these are the things that I want you to pick up in this interview, because you're going to learn a lot about Dr. Maybank. You're going to learn a lot about how she thinks. You're going to learn about just trailblazing your own path. But here's some things. I want you to pick up on the differences that she talks about between clinical medicine and public health. She's very impressive. I'm really impressed by her, but I became more impressed by her when she shared a very relatable moment of imposter syndrome. You're also going to hear from her what the difference between leadership and management is, and how being intentional about what she doesn't want, how that led her on the road to success. And with all of my guests, you're going to learn how she answers hashtag I'm not just a doc. So look, without further ado, I present Dr. Aletha Maybank.
Dr. Aletha Maybank, welcome to Docs Outside the Box.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Maybank, before we get all into the nitty-gritty of what you're doing right now with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene in New York City, let's take a step back. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're from, even where you're born and raised, and then what med school you went to, residency, and so forth?
Sure. So I actually grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is the capital, in the suburbs. My family's really originally from Antigua in the Caribbean, so I have a strong connection and roots to the Caribbean as well. I ended up, after leaving Harrisburg, I went to Johns Hopkins for undergrad and majored in natural sciences, public health, and then went on to med school at Temple, came back to Pennsylvania, so I went to Philly. And then after med school, I wanted to really come closer to New York City. I love New York City, and I just wanted to come out this way for sure. So I did.
Who doesn't like New York City?
Well, a lot of people don't, believe it or not. But I came. My first year, actually, of pediatric residency was at that time called UNDMJ. It was in Newark Medical School. I think it's called Rutgers now. Did my first year of residency for peds there, and then I transferred over to Albert Einstein Snyder's Children's Hospital out in Long Island. It's not called that anymore. As you know, healthcare continuously transforms, so nothing is really called what it was about 18 to 15 years ago. But I ended up finishing my peds residency at Albert Einstein. And then I went and worked for 2 years as a hospitalist to really buy some time. And we can get into that if you want. But after that time that I bought, I ended up going back into doing another residency in preventive medicine, public health. And so that was actually at SUNY, State University of New York, Stony Brook, and then they paid for the MPH at Columbia School of Public Health.
Dang. what made you decide to go back and do a residency in preventative health?
Well, so when I finished peds, it was clear to me I really didn't want to practice medicine day in and day out, at least not in a doctor's office. I felt a doctor's office for me would be a little bit too stifling, for one. Number two, the way that culture of medicine was at that time was very ethnocentric and really didn't have much diversity, and the conversations were oftentimes singular when it talked about culture. And then third, it didn't have a good appreciation of the medical culture, that there are, or at least they didn't want to acknowledge that this happened, that there are many things that influence a child's health. So having just seeing a child come to you, taking care of that child in that immediate moment, and then not really focusing or paying attention to all the social factors, where the child lives, what's happening in their day-to-day, are they doing well in school, what does their parents have access to, are their parents in their lives, all these things that impact health that you really couldn't have the conversation with. I would hear, it's the social work's responsibility to take care of that. They'll focus on that, and that just didn't make sense to me.
So I hear that a lot, definitely. In trauma, we get that a lot also. There's a lot of psychosocial issues, socioeconomic issues, and oftentimes, just like what you heard, we say, just let the social worker take care of that. And obviously, there's a lot of return in trauma also. So I'm sure that had to be really frustrating on your part also.
Right. And so, I think we as, students and folks who either have experienced, some of that trauma either in our own personal lives, or we have a connection because of who we are serving to our patients. I think in more intimate ways, we're very clear the medical community is not that diverse, and oftentimes they don't have that kind of personal connection to experience that allows kind of hearts to open up in a different type of way. And so I knew that in order for my own kind of happiness within the field of medicine, or else I would become very frustrated, that I needed to figure out what to do. And when I was at Hopkins, I said I was natural sciences, public health. I initially was actually biology, and I just didn't like all those straight science courses. I was like, this is too much for me. So Hopkins at that time, they didn't have public health majors back then. They have lots of public health majors now, like where they have actually at the undergrad. We were actually allowed to go down to the School of Public Health and take courses. So I remember then, and I remember going to, it was like Native American Health was the first course I took, and I was like, wow, this is great. I'm learning about history and culture and how it impacts somebody's health. And it was just really exciting for me. So I remembered those roots. And when I heard about a preventive medicine residency in public health, I was like, oh, well, maybe I need to look at this a little bit more closely. And I did. I had some opportunities where positions opened up, and I really didn't have to search too hard because somebody, dropped out, and I was able to kind of go into the position. And that's how I ended up in preventive medicine.
Did you find that you ended up talking to other people? Like, did you have any mentors, or did you have any colleagues who you kind of verbalized during your time as a hospitalist that I'm not really feeling this? And if you did they were they supportive? Were they negative? How did that go?
That's a very good question. I would say for the most part, many people didn't really get this idea of not practicing medicine as a physician. Especially my mother. I went to med school so long. What was I thinking? But it was hard to find support in that area. I had other friends who were going that route, and they were really the ones who were the inspiration for me to believe that I could actually do this, and that I didn't have to go that typical route. But I can't say at that particular time there were mentors. I had mentors post that after I got into public health, but none really to kind of encourage me and say, hey, go ahead and do this. It was really by watching some other courageous young physicians do it.
Okay. All right. So now you're in your career as you're in your residency doing preventative medicine. Tell us how that went, and then when did you start getting this thought process, okay, like I want to be everywhere, like, because you are in so many different ways in media, which is phenomenal. But talk us through that process of just going through preventative medicine as a residency and, I guess, proverbially having the light bulb go off.
Right. So for my program, residency director for preventive medicine would just tell you it's preventive medicine, just to be clear, and public health, because preventive is an adjective that means something else. So preventive medicine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I was fortunate when I was a preventive medicine in Long Island, or a resident in Long Island. There happened to be a black commissioner of health. Dr. Brian Harper was the commissioner of the Suffolk County Department of Health. I was working on a practicum project, so it's part of the preventive medicine residency. You have to do this large project where you take larger data sets, or you collect data, you analyze the data, and then you present the data, because part of public health clearly is understanding epidemiology and biostats, and you have to demonstrate that you actually have learned something, but can also apply it in a very large way. It's not about the patient, but it's about the institution or the population you're working with. And so my practicum work was looking at, I was actually placed at a health department there in Long Island, and I was looking at assessing the cultural attitudes among the employees within the health department. I've always been very interested in just culture of anything, whether it's culture of an institution, culture of society, culture of neighborhoods, and how it influences health, but more specifically, how does it influence behavior and choices. And so while I was doing that practicum work, the commissioner heard about me doing this work, and there was a movement across the country that was happening in starting offices of minority health. And there were about probably 30 states at that time that had offices of minority health. There was one other one at a local level in New York State, and so he wanted to start the second office of minority health out there in Long Island. And so they asked me, actually before I finished my residency, would I be interested in being the founding director of the Office of Minority Health? I was fortunate to have a program director, Dr. Dorothy Lane, who was and is just highly receptive of opportunity, but also had a strong belief in my leadership potential, which I probably didn't even recognize or see at that moment.
That's what I was about to say. Did you recognize that about yourself?
No, not really. Not at all. No. Because that was like really before I started leadership positions. This is like my first, the Office of Minority Health ends up my first leadership position in this kind of way. I'm going to let you finish, but I just want to get because I want to get into that thought process that you were at when someone presented you with this situation, because sometimes, on the show we talk about, limiting thoughts at times, and sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. Did you find yourself when they presented you with that opportunity, did you ever start thinking to yourself, why are they asking me? I can't do this, or maybe just kind of like a fear of success or something like that? Yeah, that's a great question, and absolutely. We all sometimes can be our own stumbling blocks and can say messages to us that aren't always productive. And so, I did say, it's an opportunity. I was like, I really didn't have much experience, honestly, in anything related to health disparities at that point, or health equity. What I had was an interest through my coursework. At Columbia, I took a few courses in doing this project, but I was like, do they realize this? I really hadn't had experience outside of residency in terms of managing people, putting together an office, and I especially didn't have any experience working in government. So I guess, part of the leadership, and this, and in the work that you're doing and all this that you're leading, that we as leaders sometimes don't even recognize the courage that we do have, and we just do it, and we're willing to take that risk because we see something larger, and we see that there's a vision there, and we do ultimately believe in ourselves, and that we probably also have a good amount of support around us to say, you know what, go ahead forward and go ahead and do this. And so I did have a lot of support, too, to say, you should go ahead. Who else is going to really do it? There weren't that many people, especially physicians. It's a really unique physician that is going to go into government, that's going to stop practicing medicine, that understands social justice or has a connection to social justice, more so now, I would say, but not at the time that I was coming through residency and med school for sure. So I had those pieces. So, I talk about Malcolm Gladwell, and he has this book, The Outliers, and he talks about how success, isn't just about motivation and passion, but it's like this culmination of having all of these opportunities that you don't even see that come together that create and propel and move us forward. So that's, to me, what happened at that particular moment.
Okay. So let's fast forward a little bit. I'm assuming you took that position, probably killed it, did a great job.
Well, it's one of my – thank you. I appreciate that. It's what I consider one of my greatest professional success, because I was there for 3 years. It was hard because I was commuting back and forth from Brooklyn. But I did that for 3 years, and the office still stands. They actually, I think they celebrated, I want to say their 12th or 13th annual Health Disparities Conference this past year. So, and that's what I started when I was there. So it's cool to know, even though it's probably not the size or it was maybe at that point in time, but it's still there. So to know that you're the founding director of something, it still has activity, it's still relevant, feels good.
Now, if I may ask you this question, what's the biggest difference working in public health as opposed to being in clinical medicine? What's the biggest difference, right? Obviously, you're in clinical medicine, you're dealing with one patient at a time, or several patients at a time. You're worried about lab values. You're coming in the morning to round, and then you compare that with taking care of, in essence, patients on a 30,000-foot view. On a 1,000-mile or even a million, population-based type of view. Talk about or compare and contrast the differences there if you can.
Yeah, I should say that for me, the difference between clinical medicine and public, and I want to make sure I'm distinct that I'm also in government and public health, because you can be in public health and be in a community-based organization, a foundation, and all of that. As a government public health person, it definitely has that macro view that you talked about. This opportunity city, New York City is a city of 8.5 million people, and so, to impact people on this level is quite remarkable, rewarding, and powerful. In terms of the day-to-day, when I was a hospitalist, and the way that worked when I was in the neonatal intensive care unit, I woke up, I saw the patients, and there was kind of this cycle of which people came and they left, they came and they left, and I saw different people, but there wasn't continuity kind of in thought and in planning to change lives in a bigger way. So my work here has a lot to do with being thoughtful in terms of planning for the future or planning forward, whether a month away, 2 years from now, or 3 years from now. And so that process is different of how I approach work. In terms of the literal, being in government and public health here in New York City, I specifically oversee different offices across the city, so I actually have to go physically to different places. I have to meet with people in our what we call neighborhood health action center neighborhoods, but I have a lot of meetings where I meet with leaders of organizations, so I have to do a lot of relationship building, a lot of relationship development, so that we can figure out how best to work with partners in order to create solutions for the problems that exist as it relates to health. I oversee the management piece is probably the biggest piece. This has been the greatest learning lesson, I would say, is this distinction between leadership and management. All
right, let's talk about that. Let's get into that.
So leadership, there's something I feel innate in leadership. You're a leader, like you just kind of lead. Like you've been born with this ability to inspire and see things and have vision, and that's not easy for everyone, but that's who I am. So that part I kind of get. The management piece, the idea that now I have to lead people and to help, how do I figure out how to operationalize that vision, so actually have some action happen behind it, requires a whole different skill set that oftentimes you're not trained in how to do in med school or residency. And so, that was a huge learning curve, because I went from Office of Minority Health in Suffolk County with like a team of 4, and now I have, a team of 220 people. So, yeah, so, I have to learn a lot about myself, truthfully, and how I show up in this space as a manager, because if you don't understand yourself well as a manager, you will kind of do those opportunities, those areas where you have opportunity improvement, or what we call weaknesses, will shine when you're a manager. And so you have to really understand how to interact with people, how to have some consistency with people, but also some flexibility to understand that your team and the people within your team are different, and that different people require different responses and different ways of working with them, and different types of accountability. So there's a whole another body of work under management that's been also really good, but definitely much more challenging.
Do you think that leadership can be taught, it could be acquired, or you think it's just something you're born with?
I think there are aspects of leadership that definitely can be taught, but I feel the root of somebody wanting to be a leader or moving into that space, there's something innate in that person that allows them to know that they can do it, or if somebody's telling them they can do it, they eventually believe it. Because you could work with somebody and say, you're a leader, you can do this, but if they don't get to that point of believing that, then they'll never be that. So I think there has to be something that turns on in someone and whatever that push is, that says, you know what, I can do this, and I will move forward. And you may need support in order to do that. Not everybody has that.
Obviously, as you're now the founder and director of the Center of Health Equity, can you talk about that a little bit, actually?
Sure. So the Center for Health Equity is now 3 years old, 3.5 years old. And this was when our Commissioner of Health here, Dr. Mary Bassett, she came back on board and really wanted to focus more explicitly on health equity, health disparities, and make sure that all that we did across the health department had that lens. But more specifically to like racial justice, racial inequity, and understanding that, a lot of people talk about the social determinants of health, which has become very jargony in a way. People say it, and I'm not sure they fully understand what they mean by it. But it's not only focusing on where people live, it's not only focusing on the education, income, jobs, but also what are the structures that created inequities in those particular areas. So that means we have to understand, well, how did this country evolve in the first place? And one of our greatest and most powerful systems that have produced inequities in this country is racism. There are other isms and there are other forms of oppression, but if you look at the policies, you look at the role that government has played in policies as it relates to racism, that's where, we're really shifting our focus, and the evidence really supports it more and more in science. And so we're really working to elevate that racism is a fundamental cause of why health inequities exist. And so the center is working to look at our own practices internally. So if we, we can say health equity, we should pursue health equity. Neighborhoods have these different health outcomes based on race or based on where they live or income. But then, and then as an institution, as a health department, we should be doing something about it. But the reality is because we're part of this culture and this system in the United States society, we, the people, as within our health department, also have been subject to kind of the thinking and the teaching of what we understand about race and racism in this country, and there isn't much understanding around it. And so we need to kind of tackle our own understanding internally and challenge ourselves on how we do our work. How do we collect data? How do we create policies? How do we create programs and have a more critical lens tied to dismantling the racist structures and practices that we have put forward?
Wow, this is some really powerful work that you all are doing down there. So in terms of hoops or any hurdles that you faced getting to this point, are there any that you'd like to share on this show?
You know, in terms of hoops and hurdles, I feel like I've been very blessed in the opportunities that have presented themselves to me. As I expressed, I've had great support systems, and I've had these doors open up. The one thing I will say is that I've been pretty intentional around knowing what it is that I don't want. I don't always know what it is that I want in terms of, or knowing where my career is going to go, in the next 5 years or 2 years or 3 years. But I've always been clear that I don't want to go a particular direction, and I have some vision on what it is that I'd like to be doing on a day-to-day. And I feel because I've been intentional around that, and I guess I've had a certain amount of courage around that I've been able to kind of go a path that is rewarding and happy for me.
Love it. That's a good answer.
Thank you.
Well, because, most people, they realize what they don't want to do and they never take action on it. And then, they end up complaining, or they end up kind of doing the same things over and over again, kind of spinning their wheels in mud, unfortunately not taking action. And then, they're 5 years, 10 years deep in things that they don't want to do. So the fact that you can recognize that, even though not knowing what the next step may be, I think that's admirable. So we're getting towards the end of the interview. We're going to ask some fast-fire questions like I do with all my guests. Literally, I'm just going to ask you a question. Just think about the first thing that comes off the top of your head. You ready? Game?
Uh-huh.
I hear some trepidation on that end. Don't worry. We'll get through this. We'll get through this, Dr. Maybank.
Good.
So what's one thing you want people to learn from this podcast?
Exactly what we just talked about. I think the one thing I want people to learn is to believe in yourself, follow your intuition. I know that's the second thing, and go with it. That's the third thing, but it's all lumped together in a package.
Love it. Love it. Let's say you got a chance, Dr. Maybank, you got a chance to go back and talk to your younger self as a pre-med, maybe even as an earlier med student. What kind of advice would you give yourself back then?
Probably the same advice, honestly. And I think it's just having that sense of confidence in who you are, especially as a person of color. There are many times in which we question, do we even belong at this table? That still happens now for me. Folks have a perception of me that, I walk into a space and I'm fully with it and I fully have all this confidence and but honestly, I still question myself almost every single day. Am I doing my job good enough? Am I good enough to even be around this table? Am I good enough to be thought of a leader in this way? And so I think it's a constant conversation and making sure you have people around you also for you to believe and know that you are enough, and for me to know that I am enough.
So a little bit of imposter syndrome, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think there's, I think we all have a sense of, many of us have a sense, not all, but many of us probably have a sense of that. Whether people admit it or not is a whole nother conversation. But, in this society, when you've been in a society that has looked at you and has devalued who you are, and you see those and hear those messages over and over again, and I know I did in my childhood of being the only black kid in a white neighborhood, it's embedded in you and it sticks with you, and it takes a while, to kind of overcome that, and I'm not sure we all fully overcome that.
That's real talk. What's one life hack or even technology that you use to make your life easier? And the reason I ask that is because you have so much on your plate, from what you do on a job level and obviously what you do outside. How are you able to keep all track of all this stuff? Give us something that you do to kind of make your life easier.
That's a good question. I'm fortunate to have support around me and have teams that, definitely keep my schedule and keep me on track. But I would have to say, my phone, I love very much, and my notes section of my phone is very useful. I make sure I write myself notes quite often because things will come and go pretty quickly, and I will forget. So I make sure I kind of write them down in my notes section of my phone.
Excellent. A lot of people have been saying that recently, using their cell phone or, like you said, the note section. So I know I rely heavily on, I use to-do lists that are on my phone, so can't operate without it. So what's one thing that you're proud of that nobody else knows about?
That nobody else knows about?
That nobody else knows about. Mm-hmm.
I don't know about
that. How about this? How about a very few people know about?
I don't know. I was going to say something else that a lot of people know about that I am very proud of, though. I can't.
Let's do that then. It's okay. We can do whatever you want to do. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, the one thing that I'm very proud of is that I just did this Dancing for the Stars competition, and so I grew up dancing, and I'd really fallen off.
Wait, like the TV show Dancing for the Stars?
Well, it's not on TV, but New York City has a local organization called Stars of New York. And so they pick like local, quote, stars, which I guess I considered that. But it was, I had to dance the hustle. And so.
Is this the hustle? What?
Oh, I know. I didn't even know what the hustle was.
Dr. Maybank, are you serious?
Well, the dance, come on. It was started when I was born or before I was born, so no.
Do the hustle. Is this on video? Because I want to put this in the show notes.
It actually is on video. So, and I challenged myself to do this and to get in front of people and dance at this point in my life is a real sense of accomplishment for me because it's something I love, but I also was afraid to get on stage, so I said, let me focus and do this. So I think, and that's another important message for docs, is that, medicine can really pull us in, right, and pull us into the point where we can get so focused on the field and our work and our day-to-day. But many of us have lots of other skills and opportunities and things we grew up doing that we love. And maybe there are things that we want to do. And I think it's just very important that we keep eye on that as well, and do the things that we still love, because those are the things that will still make us great doctors moving forward.
Oh, I love that answer. And that actually leads me to my next point. So, in order to really get and connect with the guests, I literally have to do online stalking of my guests, and you're definitely included in one of them. I had to stalk you to figure out exactly what you're all about, which is a lot of stuff. So, for example, you served on 2 trips to Haiti during the post-earthquake relief effort. You created your own blog called On Call in the City. You had your own biweekly column in Ebony Magazine. You had some writings in Huffington Post. You've been guest speaking everywhere. How are you able to, talk to doctors about, just the ability to make sure that you can kind of do all things in essence? I think, like you just said before, physicians get so taken up by being in the hospital or in essence by their practice that they forget to kind of do the things that they're passionate about. And obviously you're very passionate about public health and talking and writing and speaking. Can you talk a little bit about that? How are you able to do so many different things and do it so well?
Thank you. So I understand the reason why, and I think it's important, why do I speak and why do I write? And to me, the role of the physician is not just to see patients. If we look at our legacy, and again, as physicians of color, we were more than just people who saw people and took care of the health for people. Many times our role had to advocate for the patient, but advocate for broader societal changes because we were oppressed as Black folks who wanted to be physicians. And so I feel that as a field of science, we undervalue the power of media. We undervalue the power of our own voice and credibility. And I think there's tremendous opportunity, whether it's, I'm here in New York City, so it's easier, I would say, because there's lots of media entities here. And I work for the New York City Department of Health, which is like, it has not only a national profile, but an international profile. So a lot of attention comes here. So that's opened the doors for a lot of opportunities. However, all of us live in some local place somewhere. And there are media entities, there are local newspapers, there are blogs. And I think it's really important for us to understand the value of us as credible messengers to put messages forward. And that's the intention behind it. And so that's why I do it. And in terms of having all the opportunity, a lot of it's really connected to my job and the job that I do. And the opportunities that are here in New York City. And honestly, once one door opens, many other doors open as well. And if people see that you're a good public speaker, they're going to want you to come in even more.
And we definitely got to experience that on this call. So, Dr. Aletha Maybank, can you take a moment just to answer this or complete this sentence? It's, I'm not just a doc, I'm a...
I was going to say a dancer.
Wait, say that again?
I was going to say a dancer.
Boom, I like that, actually. You know, you definitely, so look, this entire conversation, you've thrown so many different curveballs at me. You know, that's really phenomenal, because at the last minute, I thought you were going to say something like, you know, advocate for, you know how it goes usually, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you say you're not just a doc, you're a dancer, I love that answer, and really definitely shows that you're not just a doc. So this was an amazing window into your life. I think the audience is going to learn a lot from you. We haven't featured anybody who does government as well as public health, so thank you very much for clarifying that. But this is awesome, and thank you so much for being on Docs Outside the Box.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and congratulations to all you, and thank all that you're doing, but also thank you for elevating the voices of physicians who are often unheard and are often not humanized, that we are people too. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Once again, I want to thank Dr. Aletha Maybank for being on the show. I know she has a very busy schedule, so I really, really appreciated her fitting me into her schedule. I learned a lot from her. I hope you all learned a lot from her also. If you want to learn more about Dr. Aletha Maybank, just go to the show notes and go to episode 52. You can learn more about her there. I'm going to catch you guys on the next episode. But before I jet, remember one thing. We only got one life. Let's make it count and live outside the box. Peace.